Let's talk to the international economist Vicky Pryce. Good to see you as always, Vicky. Welcome back. So inflation steady, but still high, of course. Should we call this a stabilisation, or is it getting stuck a bit higher than everybody would like?
Well, it's a really interesting question because, of course, most economists were expecting inflation to go up. The forecasts were for 4% or perhaps 4.1%, and I think that was a big surprise that it didn't actually happen, and particularly because one of the elements that everybody had been worrying about was food. Food prices now seem to be stabilizing. In fact, in the month, they fell. So if you look at September over August. So something that we had all been worrying about perhaps is now becoming less of an issue, and maybe we're beginning to be a little bit more like the Europeans. I mean, yes, food inflation has been happening everywhere, but the UK seems to have had more of an impact of whatever harvest, which didn't go very well, or climate change and so on, would have been than perhaps the Europeans and others. So you asked about whether it's stabilizing. I think there are a number of things that were done just the last few months in terms of annual increases that are allowed to happen by the government. This sort of process of water bills, for example, and the cost of stamps, the cost of licensing a vehicle, things that happen usually in the late spring, and they have carried through because they were quite significant this past year. And that will gradually ease. So the expectation now is maybe this is the peak, and the forecasts are, maybe they'll be proven wrong, but the forecasts are for a slowdown in inflation to happen through 2026, with maybe reaching once again target by the end of the year.
Well, you mentioned food prices there, so they're now slowing, but clearly some people still struggling to afford food. A report out today saying that 1 in 10 UK households are food insecure. So this persistently high inflation is still affecting families.
Absolutely, and that and energy costs, of course, in the sense of electricity costs for households, which are quite high. It's one of the reasons why the government is now looking to relieve some of the pressures that households are having, particularly the lower end of the pay scale. And it is absolutely true that the lower you go in terms of incomes, the more of your income is spent on just food and energy. And there are now suggestions, they have not been confirmed, that perhaps value-added tax, in other words, sales tax for energy or electricity in particular, may be coming down to ease some of those pressures. But yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, food price increases have been a very important part of what has worried everybody. And if you look at GDP per head in particular and real personal disposable incomes, they have been suffering, even though we've seen real wages overall rise over the last year and a half.
So this surprisingly low, let's call it, inflation number is now getting people thinking about what that might mean for interest rates, isn't it? Could we see a cut?
Yes, interesting, really, that until about a week ago or so, the expectation of the markets that there would be a cut in November were very, very low. They were about 22%. Well, now there is an expectation that actually there would be a cut. That expectation has gone up to 72%, if I remember correctly. I looked at the market earlier. So that suggests that there could well be a reduction in rates, which I think is exactly what Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, would like to see. Can I correct myself and say in December rather than in November? In November is when we have the budget. And a lot will depend on what type of even tax increases or anything else may happen in the budget that may either act to raise inflation possibly in the eyes of the Bank of England, or slow down the economy and therefore reduce inflation in the eyes of the Bank of England. So the decision in December will depend crucially on what happens in the budget.
Vicky, great to get your thoughts as always. Thank you for coming on the programme. Vicky Pryce, the international economist.
Thank you.